Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gayle Carson. Welcome to Living Regret Free, a program that shows you how to live a better and more joyful life. As an added bonus, I invite you to listen to an introduction to my Mindset Matters program, which ties into this so well. Go to www.sobmindset.com. It's free, and I know you will enjoy it. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at gaylecarson13@gmail.com or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter. My guest today is Diane Gehart, PhD. She's an author, an award-winning professor of counseling and family therapy at California State University, Northridge, and a practicing psychotherapist. Her new book is Mindfulness for Chocolate Lovers, a lighthearted way to stress less and savor more each day. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, it's really funny about chocolate because I'm probably the only person in the world who doesn't eat it. but I sometimes like the Hershey Kisses. Those I like. So let me ask you. You talk about meditating with chocolate. So I'm not. First of all, I'm a horrible meditator. So you can imagine if I combine how I meditate with chocolate, it's not going to do too well. So tell me how it works for you. Can you really meditate with chocolate?
Yes, you can. And you can even meditate with it if you don't like it.
Oh,
and
okay.
whether you like it or don't like it, I promise there's something in it for everyone.
Well,
so
how do you do that though?
So it's based on a very classic meditation that's kind of an introductory meditation we use when we're first teaching people how to meditate, and it's an eating meditation. Because what mindfulness basically is bringing your attention on purpose. You're focusing on one thing in the present moment. So it could be your breath, it could be a sound like a chime, or it can be the sensations of eating. And so traditionally, this meditation is done with a raisin. It's kind of a neutral object. And when I started teaching mindfulness many years ago, and I'd travel around to do my workshops, I'd arrive and my little boxes of raisins for the exercise would be crushed in the suitcase. And so I had to find something better to travel with. And I tried chocolate. And it really, most of us have an emotional attachment in one way or the other to chocolate. It could be you hate it, it could be you love it, but most of us have some sort of more of an opinion we have about chocolate than we do about raisins. And the basic exercise is to first observe it very slowly, like you've never seen anything like it before. And it slows you down. And the most difficult part of the meditation, and this would even be really good for someone who doesn't like chocolate, is you put it up to your mouth like you're about to eat it, and you just notice what thoughts or feelings go through your mind. And you just observe those, try to do it as patiently and tolerantly as you can, because many people get frustrated. You might have a feeling of dread. Someone else might have a feeling of excitement and anticipation, but it helps you work with strong emotions. And then you just mindfully eat it, trying not to judge it as good or bad. And for most people, they're trying to judge it to the best chocolate, and rank it in their head. And for you, you're going to try to just be curious about it without thinking, I hate this thing, I hate this thing.
Well, yeah, I got to tell you something, though. I am a raisin lover. My mom used to make rice pudding and put raisins in it. And of course, she'd always say to me, is it enough? And I'd say, no, more. And of course, to this day, I can't eat rice pudding because 99% of the people who make it do not make it with raisins. And it just isn't the same without raisins. So I would probably have to travel with those raisins you were talking about as opposed to the chocolate.
That's
But we also, you have your thoughts about happiness. You say there are myths about happiness. What are some of the myths that you talk about?
Well, I think one of the biggest myths most of us struggle with is this a concept that more money will lead to greater happiness. I mean, how many people walk around thinking, God, if I just won the lottery or an extra million or two would really, an extra 1,000, whatever it is in your head. But there's actually a lot of research on this, and they found that happiness kind of peaks around making 100,000, and then once you make 250 or 250,000 per year, your happiness level actually starts to decline, which is so counterintuitive. And there are lots of reasons for this. And so what they do talk about when you have money, what actually is correlated with happiness is spending it on positive experiences, meaningful experiences, learning something new, building social connections, because those are the things that are actually correlated with lifelong happiness.
It's interesting because I agree with you. I don't think money can buy happiness. However, I think it can make certain things easier for you. I mean, if you're struggling with your rent or you can't pay your bills, it's hard to be happy because you're always worried. But I will say that once your basic needs are taken care of, that hierarchy of Maslow, you can really, I think, get a great deal of happiness out of, are you happy in what you do? Do you have great friends? Is your family the way you want it to be? Do you have an animal or pet in your life? All of those kinds of things, I think, create happiness. I agree that money doesn't create happiness, but I will tell you it certainly makes life easier for some people. But you also say that happiness is a life skill, and I kind of believe that, really, Diane, because I am basically a happy person. It's very, very difficult for me to become depressed. As a matter of fact, if I do get depressed, it's about for 30 seconds. I mean, it's just not in my nature, no matter how bad things are. So how do people make happiness a life skill if this is not how they're naturally inclined?
Well, my book is filled with lots of ideas, but I think the most important one is realizing that we always have a choice in how we interpret things. And we get into habits of how we frame and look at things. And so, for example, we know that pessimists are by and large less happy. And we know that optimists, by and large, are happier. And there's actually a very simple interpretive kind of frame that each uses. So for a pessimist, when something bad happens, they're like, yep, there it is. Things like this always happen to me. And so in a pessimist mind, negative happenings are the default, and any good things are kind of the exception, where the optimist is the exact opposite, where they see good things as the default setting in their life, and the exceptions are, or the negative things are kind of the exceptions, and that they see that they're going to get their lives back on track. And another concept I offer in the book is you contrast kind of this kind of typical Western way of looking at happiness. In Eastern approaches like Buddhism, they really try to cultivate what's called equanimity, realizing there are going to be ups in life, there are going to be downs, and you just got to learn how to surf those waves, and realizing, it's going to go, if you can have peace with the fact that life goes up and down, things go well for a while, or in certain areas, then it's more difficult, but things always go back to being okay if you keep moving forward. Having that real basic faith it makes a big difference in terms of how you approach those problems, how big they become in your mind, how much you worry about them. And all of that contributes significantly to happiness, along with some of the other research that was kind of surprising, is that people who throughout the day take time to really mindfully enjoy the little things. And we have all these sayings, it's always the little things in life that make you happy. There's a lot of truth in that. And so if you can look out, like when I dropped my kids off at school this morning, it's a fall day here in California. It's 50, it's nippy, it's crystal clear, it's beautiful. And to take that moment to just go, God, it's a beautiful fall morning here. It's stringing a bunch of those moments together throughout the day, regardless of what happens, is highly correlated with when a person says, I am happy in life.
But let me ask you, it goes back to this nature versus nurture. Do you think a lot of how people view happiness has a lot to do with how they're brought up and their surroundings? Or do you think that there are people who are naturally predisposed to be happy?
Well, it's interesting. There's a fair amount of research that we kind of have these genetic default set points, but I think so much of it is learned in our childhood as we, face adversity, how to think of that adversity. And so, yes, it definitely, we all get templated by our parents, our, community, our schools, our teachers. It's amazing how many people, our coaches, right? They all have so much influence in how we think about adversity and how we take it on. And so, yes, very early in life, a lot of this gets learned. And if you feel like you didn't get the best, templating in your early years, you can change that. It's a very changeable thing. And it's a habit of look at how you look at things, and also the choices we make in terms of how we spend our time, the relationships we put energy into, and the things we prioritize in our life.
Well, you talk about befriending problems. What do you mean by that? What does befriending mean?
Well, that is a concept that kind of comes out of the mindfulness literature and philosophy, where when you practice mindfulness, kind of like I was describing with chocolate, it's a good example for you. You're someone who doesn't like chocolate, and you're sitting there, you're holding it in front of your mouth, right? And you're like, oh God, I've got to do this dreadful exercise, eat something I don't like. And you can watch your mind go through that. And what we try to do is quiet the judgments of whether this is good or bad or preferred or not preferred. And many people I know who've done this chocolate meditation exercise who don't like chocolate, and I try to get them to just quiet the judgment, have a taste, and just notice the experiences in your mouth, if you can, without the story about what you think about and your preconceived notions about chocolate. And it allows you to have a new experience in relation to that. And in your case, it's a problem, right? Something you don't like, a new experience in relationship to that. And so befriending problems is about emotionally kind of letting go of our panic. Oh my God, this is something I don't want. We all kind of go into a little mental frenzy, just accepting that it is what is for right now. And the most amazing thing is when you can do that, you experience that problem situation in a different way, even if it's very slightly, and it opens up new kind of doorways for possibilities for how to relate to it. And that allows you, sometimes you solve it, sometimes you transform it, sometimes you just see it differently, and you feel more freedom in a relationship to it. But, most psychological theories say that virtually every mental health condition, anxiety, depression, substance use, even psychosis, comes down to the fundamental fact that you do not want to accept whatever problem is in your life right now. And so you're doing a lot of creating these symptoms to not emotionally accept the fact that, something you don't want has happened. And so befriending problems is all about, even if you don't like it, you kind of quiet the resistance you have in your mind to this reality, experience it in a new way, allowing it to shift.
Wow. So when you talk about crazy wisdom, you have all these little terms that you use.
Yes, I do.
Crazy wisdom. Is that the back door to happiness?
Yes, I love to talk about crazy wisdom. And yes, it is the back door to happiness. And so you could say that mindfulness is a very logical, linear way to work on happiness. But it's very important because mindfulness is a kind of serious, most of us would find it very boring in the traditional format to sit down and watch your breath, right? But crazy wisdom is kind of the counterbalance in Eastern traditions like Buddhism. It's the counterbalance to mindfulness. And it is using laughter to point out, and playing with opposites to point out life truths. And so not all humor, counts as crazy wisdom, but learning how to laugh at our struggles, laugh and to play with kind of the contradictions in life in a lighthearted way. It's very important to keep a sense of humor. It's very important for our sanity. There's so much research behind being able to be lighthearted, even in the face of adversity. Being able to have that playful spirit is very, very, it's critical, really. And a lot of us adults, as we get older, we sometimes lose that ability to laugh at ourselves, to laugh at life. And so that's what crazy wisdom's all about.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's really important to be able to laugh at yourself and to have a good, hearty laugh. I mean, sometimes I'll be watching TV or I'll be watching a movie or even on an airplane, which I'm on all the time. So I see most of my movies there. I let out this big guffaw and I say to myself, oh boy, all those people around me, because of course I've got headphones on, I must think I'm crazy because I'm laughing so hard. But I think it is really important to have great laughter in your life. But you also talk about snakes. You talk about snakes on the path to happiness. So where do the snakes fall into all of this?
So snakes are the word I use to refer to people with very persistent personality patterns. The ones that in the world of mental health diagnosis, we would talk about narcissistic personality disorder. And I know people love to throw that word around a lot today. But when you reach the level of personality disorder, it's a very persistent pattern across all relationships and contexts. Borderline personality disorder is another one. And this is someone who has a very unstable sense of self, but they tend to see things as all good, all bad. And you, if you're their friend, you go from being all good to all bad and kind of back and forth. There's a lot of instability, both in how they see themselves and others. And then, of course, the antisocial personality, which kind of overlaps with what they call in criminology the sociopath. So, but these personality traits, they are, I will tell you, early in my career, I was so idealistic. I really didn't want to, I thought everyone could change. And I think people can change. Certainly for borderline personality, there are treatments that really do work. For antisocial personality or narcissist, it's a little bit tougher. But sometimes when you're really working on yourself and being happy and getting to a good place, you meet these snakes on the path, is what I call them. And as a therapist who I've been in practice for 25 years, and there are certain personalities that are just much more difficult to be with, to live with, to have children with, to marry, to work with, to have as a boss. And understanding and recognizing these personalities is very important. And because they do start off as very, very charming. If you're dating them, they're often the most charming person you've ever met. But then there are these patterns of control, using a lot of the pity play in terms of manipulating from that position. They tend to always be the victim in their life. And it starts out really good, but it can end up in a very emotionally abusive place. And so I think learning to identify these personalities and then how to relate to them more effectively is really important on the road to happiness, because these personalities tend to be attracted to unusually happy, unusually generous and kind people. As they get more of their needs met that way. So, there are a lot of them out there. We all have them in our lives, but it's learning how to skillfully deal with them so that you don't get yourself kind of sucked dry. I think it's a very important thing.
Well, I can well imagine. I know that there certainly are the manipulators out there in the world. I've certainly met them. I've certainly experienced them. And I'm always surprised by them because I don't always spot them right off. There are certain people you can spot, but there are certain people that just, they're hiding their snakiness right along with everything else that they're doing. But you also talk about having fierce compassion and developing fierce compassion. And I think it's very important to be compassionate, but I also think it's important not to just lay down and let people take advantage of you. So what is this fierce compassion and how do you develop it?
Well, the concept of fierce compassion does come out of some of the world of Buddhist psychology. And in the Buddhist world, they very consciously cultivate compassion. for example, the Dalai Lama will say you don't learn compassion, from your friends and family, because if you're kind to them and they're kind back, that's just a good business deal. Whereas compassion is learning to cultivate feelings of compassion and understanding and caring for someone who's very, very different from you, someone who doesn't make a lot of sense, and there isn't a benefit for you to do it. They'll even talk about using your enemy. The Dalai Lama will say, it's the Chinese people, the Chinese government is who taught me compassion, not my own people, because they were all kind of nice to me. So, but learning to see, and so I think fierce compassion is being willing to do that. And even when you have a difficult personality, let's say there is someone who would qualify for narcissistic personality disorder in your family or in your life, learning to have compassion for that person, you can still protect yourself and have healthy boundaries. And even you may need to distance yourself in certain situations, in certain contexts, so you don't get manipulated. But you can still have compassion and not dehumanize them just because they're different than you. And that seems to be what human beings are pretty good at, is that we, when people are different than us, we don't tend to see them as human as those who are similar to us. And we can open up a newspaper virtually any day of the week, or open our news feed, excuse me. I lapsed into a 20th century metaphor. Look at how much we all struggle with people who are in a different, life situation, who are been raised in a different place, in a different culture, in a different time, and we struggle understanding them. And so fierce compassion is learning to keep your heart open to those people, and also to have compassion for yourself and your life when things don't go well, when tragedy hits we all want to close down. Where fierce compassion is keeping your heart open to life, even the difficult parts, because that's also what keeps us human, makes us human. And when you can do that, even the most difficult times tend to unfold in a much more, a much more beautiful, healing way.
Don't we wish that most people would be like that? I mean, we're talking about living regret-free on this show. We talk about, we're talking about meditation today, and happiness, and befriending, and all of these things. And it's not easy. I mean, in this complicated world that we have, and we don't want to believe that there are all these people out there that are out there to maybe take advantage of us, but we do have to keep our guard up. So all of these things that you're talking about are very, very important. And I know that you have a tip piece or something called Trying Chocolate Meditation to Reduce Stress and Anxiety. And I think that's something that our guests might be interested in, our listeners. So how would people get in touch with you, Diane? How would they find you, and how could they get a hold of your little gift?
Oh, yes. So I have a website, Diane Gehart. Let me spell that for you, because it's DianeGehart.com. And my book is Mindfulness for Chocolate Lovers, and it has its own dedicated web site with free meditations and free worksheets that go with the book. And that's Mindfulness for Chocolate Lovers, plural.com. And I'm also, you can follow me on Twitter.
That sounds wonderful. I mean, the fact that our listeners can get a hold of some of those tips would be wonderful, because I know people try to figure this out, and sometimes they're able to do it, sometimes they need help. And so any of the tips that you might provide, I'm sure, would be very welcome by our listeners. So again, they can go to, it's Diane, right? Diane, Diane Gehart, but it's spelled GEHART.com, correct?
Correct, you got it.
Okay, and then there they will find how to get your book, which is Mindfulness for Chocolate Lovers, a lighthearted way to stress less and savor more each day. And then you also have these tip sheets and different free meditations that they can work with. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There's tons out on there for free.
Oh, wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, folks, you've heard it here. There is a way to find out how to do all of these things. And even though, a lot of people, including me, think it's difficult to meditate because it's hard for me to clear my mind and to sit still. I know how important it is. I mean, there's not a person that I talk to who is not meditating, who is not in a wonderful spiritual place. So I have to say that I concur, Diane, that it's a very important practice. Well, we have about just a minute left. Is there anything you'd like to tell our audience that we haven't said?
Well, I think the most important thing, if you want to practice mindfulness, is to just think small, and actually any practice in life. So with mindfulness, if you want to start doing it 1 to 5 minutes a day, and literally 1 minute a day really does make a difference. And put it into your, calendar, have your phone remind you to do it. And there's almost never a time you can say, oh, I don't have 60 seconds to do this. And you will be surprised that even 60 seconds, 120 seconds, it really does make a difference. Doing a little bit every day is where you really begin to see the results.
Well, spending 60 seconds or 120 seconds on meditation as opposed to worry is definitely something that I suggest. So that's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us today, Diane. It's been a delight, and hopefully our listeners are gaining a lot from it. So good luck to you in your practice, and thank you so much for everything that you've contributed today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. I choose my guests carefully, so if you have someone you'd like me to interview, please drop me a line at gaylecarson13@gmail.com. In the meantime, check out my intro program, Mindset Matters, at www.sobmindset.com. See you next week.